What's going on, everybody? Jesse here, and in this video, little mini series, we're going to break down how to get this crafting window working and populated. So now we have some tabs here that we press here and click around. Now, one thing to note is, while this isn't very complicated, it is pretty involved. I try to take my time to explain everything. As such, videos are going to run a little bit longer than usual. So while at the end of this first episode, you won't be able to accomplish this, we're going to get as far as we can without making the videos too long, and I'm just going to break it down into some smaller sections, and that way they're easier to digest. But this is our ultimate goal, so hopefully in only a couple extra episodes we will have this functionality all set up and ready to go. If you have any questions, do me a favor, go down, leave me a comment there. If you're having issues with it, jump on over into the Discord and ask your questions over there, and me or the community will do what we can to give you a hand. So looking forward to this one. Sit back, relax, and let's get this going. Today's episode and others just like it are brought to you by the patrons listed on the screen. If you'd like to support the channel and future development, then consider visiting my Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can receive various benefits such as early access to my videos, project downloads, as well as personalized support. You may also want to consider joining the community by joining my Discord server, where you can receive help from me as well as the community. So come on over and be a part of the conversation. All right, so starting here in the BP True first person, we're actually going to need an update crafting window function here. So where that's going to go into the primary head. We're going to call that here like so. So let's go ahead and create that. So jump on over into your WBP primary head. All right, so from in here, let's go ahead and create a new function. We'll call this update crafting window. This is going to need an input. I'm going to name this input bench, and it is going to be of type E_craft benches. So first thing we need to do is we need to come up here to our crafting window widget here. So drag this out, and we need to make sure that this is valid. I'm just going to run the macro. All right, and with that plugged in, so now pull off of this, assuming we are valid. Let's go ahead now, and we need to run a new function. And that new function we're going to call update categories, but it's going to be on the crafting window. So let's go ahead and open up our crafting window. Let's head over here and add a new function, and I'm going to call this one update categories. So what we're going to do with this, the point of this is we're going to take this information and we're going to call on the crafting component that we have on the player, and it's going to get all the categories that the player knows about, right? So remember I said in a previous video that we're going to have kind of a research and advancement type of system here. So you're not going to know how to craft everything right off the bat. So we need to find all the categories that the player currently knows about so that we can display that on the screen for them. So we've got this update categories here, and we need to again add an input, and this input, I'm going to call this again bench, and it's going to be the same type that we did last time. So just type in bench here and we get craft benches. So with that, I'm just going to set this to a variable. So let's promote that to a variable, and we can leave it as the name bench. That is fine. So now with that, we need to create a blueprint interface, or we need to create a function within one that we already have existing. So let's go ahead and jump into our blueprint interact HUD. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to call this on the player. So the player is the one who's going to have the crafting widget, the crafting component on him. So we're going to call this function on him. Plus the player character is a little easier to grab a hold of than the crafting component. So let's create a get crafting categories interface call. All right, so this is the BI_interact HUD. Let's go ahead and click add new function. And again, I'm going to call this get craftable categories. And for this, we need an input again of the bench. And then now we need an output here of all the craftable categories. So I'm going to name this craftable categories. Now, one thing you might notice, if you were to type an input or an output with just category, just spelled just like this right here, category, in a lot of different blueprints, including in here, it's going to actually put it into some strange folder. It's actually going to give you a category. So you can't really name your outputs category for some reason. There's something inside the engine or the editor that says, you know, when it sees category, it's going to put it into some sort of weird section. So just, you know, keep that in mind. So if that happens, it took me a while to figure that out. But so with this, we need to go category, and it's going to be the E item category, and this needs to be an array. All right, go ahead and save it. And we're not going to make this function right now. So let's go ahead and head back to the WP crafting window. All right, so from within the update categories function, let's go ahead and get player character, and we're going to call that interface call. So we're just going to go get craftable categories, the message, and the bench we're going to pass in is just the one we're saving right there. So now we're not going to go in, we're not going to define this function yet, right? We just created this. So let's go ahead and we're going to work down a flow here, but we need to remember that we have to come back and handle this so we don't have any problems. So I'm going to show you what I usually do when I'm working through like this, because it's easy to get sidetracked, to be jumping down the rabbit hole, as it were, just filling in all these functions, because you're going to see as we move through this, it's not really complex, but it's very involved, what we're doing here. And we're going to have a bunch of different functions and on different blueprints that we're going to have to be jumping to. So it's, you got to kind of keep track of that. But so it's not always best to just jump in and define every function as you go to. So what I usually do is I just create a comment and I go at to do, just like that, and then I just type what I have to do. So I'm going to put create craftable categories on player, right? And then usually, just to make it a little obvious for me, I change the color to a green. All right, so now what I do with this, I'll just show you guys this real quick, because we're going to have a few of these. I place it right above where I need to do the work. But now, how do I know what work I have to do? So if we push Control Shift F, or you could just do Control F and it'll do the specific blueprint that you're in, but Control Shift F will open up Find in Blueprint, and this will look in every single blueprint you have. If we type at to do, it's going to search every blueprint we have in the project, and it's going to tell us we have that right here in a comment. So we double select that, and there we go. So now you can have how many ever these in there, and then you're going to be able to easily find it and take care of what you need to do. So that's what I want to do for that one. So let's go ahead and move forward with that. So from this array, we need to do a for each loop. Now, if you just hold F and click into the graph, it's going to give you a for each loop, then just plug it all in. From here, we need to save all this information now into a different list for us. So I'm going to create a new function, or excuse me, a new variable, and I'm going to call this one categories list, and this will be of type E item category, and this will also need to be an array. Let's go ahead and drag this out now, and let's add. We don't need to add unique, because everything that comes in here will be unique when we set up this functionality, so it's not a big deal. There won't be any duplicates within this list. So we just go add, and what do we need to add? We need to add our array element there. That's all we need to do in this list. So we're just passing this list in here, saving it into a different list so that we can use it a little bit later. So now from the completed, let's run a branch. All right, now in this branch, we need to check to see if we have an active category. So if we're already within the crafting window inside the HUD, we're looking at the crafting window. When we first load it up, we won't have an active category. When we are in there clicking around, we will have an active category. So we need to check for this particular check, do we have an active category? So we need to create another variable. I'm gonna call this one active category, and this can stay item category, but we don't need this to be an array, so make it a single. I'm gonna drag this out here, and we need to just check equal, and equal enum is what we want, and we're just gonna leave it as none. Plug that into the branch there. We need to get the category list right here, type in get, and we just want to copy. We don't need a reference of this. Index 0 is perfectly fine for us. We're going to take the first item in this list, and we're going to make this our active category. So just grab 0 in here, and let's go ahead and set this now as the active category. Just plug that in there like so, and there we go. That's all we have to do for that one. So now we need to be able to populate our list. So let's go ahead and grab our categories widget right here, as we should always do. Make sure you clear the children, then drop in a for each loop, and we need to loop over our category list array. And then with this one, for every category that we have, we now need to create the category button widget. So let's go ahead and get create widget right there, and the class it needs to be is the crafting category button. Now, one thing we need to do with this button is we need to take this category, and this button is going to need to know what category it is. So let's go ahead and jump into our crafting category button. And so just go ahead and click the browse right here. It's going to take us to the blueprint. Let's open that up. And then inside the graph right here, let's go ahead and add a new variable. Call this one category. Now we can put category here. It's not going to default for us, but usually with functions or the interface calls is where that bug comes that I was telling you about. So go ahead and make this of type e-item category. And we need to make this instance editable and expose it on spawn, and go ahead and compile it and save it. If you don't compile it, you're not going to have access and didn't expose on spawn. So I'm going to click that again. There we go. So now let's go ahead and head back into the crafting window, and you'll see right here, it didn't update. So just right click on the node and go refresh node. There we go. Now we got the category. Take our array element and just plug it in like so. And from here, I'm just going to add a reroute note right there. And from here, I'm going to verify, is this active category, or is this particular category that we're on right here, the array element, is it equal to our active category? So are these the same? Are we currently iterating through our active category? So drop in the branch. And if we are, then we need to set an active state. So now we need to change the appearance of each of our buttons. So now we need to head back into the crafting category, and we're going to finish out this function. We're going to come back and do this one just a little bit, but let's head back to the crafting category button, and let's create a new function. I'm going to call this set active state. And for the input, it needs to be a Boolean. So I'm going to go B is active, and it can stay a Boolean right there. All right. So we'll come back and fill out in this function here in just a few minutes. Come back to the crafting window. All right. And from our widget here that we created, we need to call set active state. And then we need to set is active to true, because we are setting this. So if we are currently iterating through our active category, then we need to set its state to true. And once we have that, now we need to go ahead and add it to our widget. So I'm just going to drag off of here, and we need to grab our categories widget right there, pull off of this, and go add child to vertical box, because remember, this categories is a vertical box that we're adding everything to, and then just plug in the button right there. So that's what we're adding to it. Now from this, one last thing we want to do is we want to know every time the button gets pressed. So what we need to do now is we need to head back into the crafting category button. And real quick, before we do anything, I'm just going to go comment at to do set active state, just like so. So now let's head back into the crafting category button. We're going to end up coming back and setting this in just a minute. But from here, we need to create an event dispatcher. So I'm going to head back into the event graph right here. Probably didn't need to, but we got event dispatcher right here. I'm going to hit the plus. I'm going to call this one category selected. And if you're not familiar with event dispatchers, essentially that means whenever this dispatcher is called, anything that is bound to it will also receive that call, or has the ability to receive that call. So category selected. So we need to have a little bit of information down here. You can see we got inputs. Now you can copy the signature. Now if it has the same signature as something else you're working on, you can just do that, but that's not going to generally be the case most often. So I'm just going to click the plus for a new parameter, and this new parameter I'm going to go ahead and call button category, and again it is going to be of type item category and only needs to be signal. So now we need to send this category every time this is called. So we have this event dispatcher. Go ahead and compile it. It didn't save it right there all the way, so make sure you compile it till you get that check mark in there, and head back to the crafting window. All right, so now from here, one last thing we need to do is drag off of this. So now every button that we create right here, even though we don't have access to it, we're going to tie into this event. So right click off or drag off of here and just go bind event to category selected. And now it's going to want an event. Don't try to compile your project now because we don't have an event set up for this yet. So the event we want to do, just go ahead and drag off of here and go create event. Now, if you have just a regular event within the graph that you want to use, you can't do this from within a function, but if you're out on the event graph, you can tie into, that's what these red lines here are for. You can tie into other events, but now we need to create a function that we want to use. So I'm going to select this, and you can see we got different options: none, create matching function, create matching event. So we're going to do a function, and now it's going to come in here and it's going to automatically give us the input that this needs. So button category, and I'm going to change the name. You can see it gives just kind of a horrible name up there for the function. I'm going to change the name of this, and I'm going to call this one update category buttons. And then instead of button category, I'm going to actually change this to be named item category. There we go. Now, you didn't have to do that to create the function. Obviously, there was still a little bit of work, but if you have a complicated event dispatcher, it might be easier to just do that and then just change these couple names. I just wanted to show you guys what this was all about. So now we're going to end up having to come back and reset this one as well. So let's go ahead and add a comment, and there we go. At to do set function. Go ahead and compile it, and we shouldn't have any issues there. If we head back out here to the update categories, we are done with this function directly. Drag off our complete right here and type in return. Make sure you don't add this return at the end of this function here, because we're still within the loop. If you put a return node right here at the end of this, then this loop is only going to loop once and then execute, or then it's going to terminate the function call. So make sure you put it in the complete. So now essentially our update categories function is complete, but it relies on other functions such as the set active state in order for it to work properly. So now that the update categories function is complete, we're going to go back and we're going to do the at to do's on here. So if we go back to the beginning here, we've got this one right here. Now, was that our first one? Update categories. This is ahead of the function. So let's go ahead and start with this one and the get craftable categories. We can't double click on this. It's going to go to the interact, but because we're calling this on the player's already got this interface implemented on them. So we're going to go there and we're going to implement this interface called there. So head over to your player character. All right, so now from the player character, drop down the interface section right here, and we got get craftable categories. I didn't put this in a category. Remember, keep yourself organized. I will go back when all said and done and put these in categories. I just didn't want to do it on camera because it takes up a little bit of time. So double click that, and there we go. We're inside of the function. Okay, so now essentially all this function is going to end up doing is it's going to now get some information from our crafting component. So now we need to add the actual crafting component, which is AC crafting. Let's go ahead and add that. I'm just going to call mine crafting. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag this out. So now we need to create a function on here. We need to create a function called get craftable categories. So let's go ahead and open this up. All right, so now inside the AC crafting component, create a new function. Again, I'm going to call this get craftable categories. And for the category, I'm just going to do this one. What I try to do in the breakdown of these, like this is on the AC crafting component. When you're like on the player, you're going to get a bunch of the inherited variables and functions and things on there. So instead of giving it a category like crafting, I may have a bunch of things that are crafting related, but not actually part of the AC crafting component. So I just usually give the name of the component. So AC underscore crafting for the category. So that way now when I see this function anywhere in the call or any of these variables or anything in here, it's going to be listed under AC crafting, so I know it belongs to this component. All right, and that'll become relevant a little bit later, you'll see. All right, so we got this now. So with this, we need to have an input of bench, and you probably guess it, just needs to be of type E underscore crafting benches or craft bench. And as an output, I'm going to call this one craftable categories, and I'm going to give this a type of E item category. And I want to make sure it is an array because we're going to pass several of these through this. All right, I'm going to disconnect this. This is going to be a little bit of a involved function here, so a little bit going on here. So I'm just going to disconnect that for now. So now with this, we need to create a new variable. This is going to be a little bit different of a variable. We're going to use the map system, the key value pair system within Unreal. We're going to call this one craftable items master list. All right, kind of a convoluted name, but this is the item master list. And the reason why we're going to have this one, we're not going to set this right away, but in the begin play of this component, we're going to get all the initial things that the player, or we're going to get every single thing the player can craft and keep it in this list. All right, so with that, the key of this, we need to go ahead and let's just go ahead and change this. Before I change the type, I'm going to call the variable type, I'm going to go name. So just like name right here, and you'll see why it's just going to be name there. But I'm going to drag down now and I'm going to go map, and it's going to give me a second section right here. We want a Boolean, not the default integer. So we go. So now our key is a name and our value is a Boolean. So what this is going to do is we're going to put in all the named items that you can craft in the entire game, whether you know them or not, and we're going to put them in this list at the begin play, so we don't have to look up our data table again. And with that, we're going to have the Boolean here to essentially just tell us are we allowed to craft it or not? And have we learned this item yet? And if it shows negative, then we're not going to be able to craft that item. We're not going to see that item in the list. So we'll never, this main list from the data table won't change during gameplay, right? Data tables generally don't change during gameplay. So we're just going to load up the name of all those in there. And then this is how we're going to actually keep track of what the player knows. So now anytime the player researches, learns, or does anything new, teaches him how to be able to craft something different, we just come in here, we edit this list, and we find the key in here, because now that's the main thing. A key in the map system must be unique. You cannot have a key with the exact same name in there. If you try to overwrite, or if you try to put in a key that already exists, it's just going to overwrite it. So that helps us out in this scenario, because like I said, we're going to come back, we're going to be like, oh, the player learned how to craft this, so now we just take this and then change this boolean. So you'll see that as we move a little bit down the road, but this is how the map system is going to go ahead and work for us. And this will also allow us to have default items when we start the game, which we'll set up in just a little bit. So, but we've got this for now. We can start making this function without populating this list. We'll do this in a little bit. So drag this out. Let's get it. So now what we need to do is we need to get the keys. Okay. And as such, since this is automatically an array, a map is always kind of an array, but it's like two arrays in one. It's going to return an array of names. So now we need to drop in a for each loop. Now we need to iterate over the names within this list. All right, so let's grab this variable again and let's get its value. Now these are the Boolean values. And again, this is going to be an array, but the nice thing about doing it like this, right? So now this array is going to match as far as its index goes. Every time we're in here, it's going to match the same index, right? So we're going to get through here. So let's drop off of this. We don't need to iterate through this. We just need to get, and we want to copy. We don't need a reference to it, this index item. So whichever index we're currently in within the keys, we want to get its corresponding index within the value. So now drop in a branch. So now, is this true? In other words, if this is true, then we know how to craft this keyed item name. So now we need to go get data table row, plug into the true. We're not going to do anything off the false branch. So the data table, grab your DT craftable items we created in a previous episode. And for the name, we're just going to come in here and we're just going to plug that in just like that. So now come over here and off of the out row, remember it returns a struct. We're going to go break. Now we've got these three variables within this struct, and we're only going to need the category and the crafting bench. So let's jump off the crafting bench right here. And let's go equals enum, and then grab the bench that we passed in, right? So this bench correlates to what we passed into this function. So are they equal? And there's one other check we need to do, right? So we're going to have different type of crafting benches within our game. So we need to distinguish between that. However, there's going to be some things that the player is going to be able to craft without actually needing a crafting table. So that's the way I'm setting my game up. If you're going to do something similar, then what we need to do is we need to put in an OR right here. So we need to go OR, pull off the crafting bench right here, and do another equals player. Or does it equal the player? So any crafting bench, right? The crafting bench tells us here in the data table which bench is required to craft the particular item. Every time it does, if it's always a player, if it comes across one and it's player, it doesn't matter if this is equal or not. So we always want to get our player. So that's what we're doing. So does it equal the bench we're passing in or player? Drop in another branch off the found row and just go ahead and plug that into there like that. And if it did, we need to create a local variable because we're going to iterate through an array. So I'm just going to create a local one that is only available to this function. I'm going to call it L_available categories. Now you could do category, but it's good practice that because this is an array, make sure this is plural when you're writing it. So this needs to be of type category, and we don't want it to be a map. So set it back to an array. All right. And with that, I'm going to drag it out here. Now, this is where I said earlier, we're not going to worry about the categories. Now, there's going to be obviously a bunch of items within this data table that are all going to have the same crafting bench. So this is where we need to make sure we don't do any duplication. So from this local array, we go add unique. So in other words, if whatever we're passing in here already exists in here, we're not going to add it again. That's what add unique does, and make sure that whatever you add is unique. So we're going to come up here to the category from the struct, and we're just going to plug that in like so. All right, I hope that makes a little bit of sense there. So that's all we have to do for that one. So now go ahead and come down here to the for each loop on the completed. Now we plug in our return node, and what we need to return is our local variable like so. All right, so now our get craftable categories is completed. So go ahead and make sure you compile it and save it. So let's go ahead and head back into the player character. So before we head back into the player character, one last thing I want to do now that we compiled it, come up here and just select the function name. You could probably do it by just selecting it right here as well. We want to make this a pure function, right? Because we're not changing any values in here. We're just getting information and then we're passing it out. So with that, run it as a pure. They tend to run just a little bit faster and they're a little bit easier to work with. So make it a pure, again, compile it. And now let's go ahead and head over to the player character. And from here, it's as simple as pulling off of our crafting component right here and get craftable categories, pass in the bench right there, and the out is going to be this array. We're just going to pass it into the return node right there as well. So go ahead and make sure you compile and save that one, and let's go ahead and jump back into the crafting window. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up right here. The video is starting to get a little too long. If you found anything in here useful, go down, hit that like button, leave me comments if you have any questions on what we've done so far, and hit that notification bell while you're down there. You'll get notified whenever I upload the next video to this series. And if you have any questions that are a little too long for the comment, come on over and join the Discord. Until the next one, peace.